The gun went off before Mara even had the door fully open. She hit the floor of her mother's hallway on pure instinct, palms flat against the cold wood, splinters biting into her knees, heart detonating inside her chest like something had set it off. The sound was still ringing in the walls, in her ears, in the bones of her jaw. A single shot. Close. Too close. From somewhere at the back of the house. She did not scream. She had been a trauma nurse for 9 years. She had learned very early that the people who screamed in emergencies were the people who did not survive them. She pressed herself against the wall and listened. Silence. Not the comfortable silence of an empty house. The wrong kind. The kind that had weight and texture, the kind that breathed. She could hear the rain against the windows, the creak of the old house settling, the distant rush of the creek at the edge of the property. And underneath all of it, the thick, deliberate quiet of someone trying very hard not to make a sound. Mara pulled out her phone. No signal. Of course. The dead zone at the edge of Hollow Creek had never been fixed in the 8 years she had been gone. She had forgotten about it the way you forgot about the specific cruelties of the place you came from. All at once, the moment you were back inside them. She low-crawled to the kitchen doorway, her breathing controlled, shallow, measured. She came around the corner in a crouch and stopped. The back door was open. Rain was blowing in across the linoleum. A muddy boot print, large, deep-treaded, sat just inside the threshold, and beside it, on the floor, was a single brass shell casing still rocking faintly in a slow circle. Whoever had been inside was already gone. She straightened slowly, one hand gripping the counter, and that was when she saw it. Written on the wall above the kitchen table in red letters so deliberate they looked almost calm. Leave now. 2 words. Block letters. Whatever they had used was still bleeding slowly down the plaster in thin rivulets that looked, in the low light, entirely too much like something she had seen before in emergency rooms. Mara stood in her dead mother's kitchen, rain blowing in through the open back door, her hands completely steady, and felt something happen inside her chest that was not fear. It was older than fear. It was the particular cold clarity that came when the world stopped pretending to be safe. She had driven 6 hours from the city that afternoon to sell this house and leave within 2 weeks. That had been the plan. Clean, surgical, emotionally contained. She would pack her mother's things, meet with the estate lawyer, sign whatever needed signing, and return to her life. She was now standing in the middle of a crime scene on the first night. She grabbed a dish towel off the rack, wrapped it around the shell casing without touching it directly, and put it in her coat pocket. Then she pulled the back door shut against the rain, took a picture of the wall with her phone, and walked out to her car to find a signal. She found one a quarter mile down the county road, pulling over with her hazards on, rain hammering the roof. She called 911 and spoke clearly and gave her address and described exactly what she had found in the kitchen. The dispatcher told her to stay outside, away from the house, and wait for a unit. She waited. The first cruiser came up the road in 11 minutes. She had counted because counting kept her focused. The headlights swept the tree line and then flooded the road, and she stepped out of her car into the rain with her arms loose at her sides, and the door of the cruiser opened. She heard the boots before she saw the man wearing them. Long stride, unhurried, the kind of walk that belonged to someone who was never in a hurry because things had a way of waiting for him. He stepped into the edge of her headlights, and she felt her breath catch in a way she had not given it permission to. He was tall, broad through the shoulders, wearing a canvas jacket with the sheriff's department patch on the sleeve and a face that looked like it had been carved out of something harder than ordinary bone. Sharp jaw, heavy brow, eyes that caught the headlight and held it somewhere deep and unreadable. He was the kind of man you noticed the way you noticed weather, not because you chose to, but because something in your body registered it before your mind had the chance to form an opinion. She had never seen him before in her life. And yet the way he looked at her, direct, measured, with the faintest shadow of something she could not name, made her feel as though he already knew exactly who she was. "You the one who called it in?" he said. His voice was low and even, the kind of voice that didn't lift at the end of sentences, that told you things rather than asking them. "Mara Calloway," she said. "I got into town this evening. I'm staying at my mother's property on Croft Road. Someone was inside the house when I arrived. I heard a gunshot, then found a written thread on the kitchen wall and a shell casing on the floor." He looked at her for exactly 1 second longer than the information required. Anyone hurt? No. You touch anything? The shell casing. I wrapped it in a dish towel. It's in my coat pocket. Something moved in his expression. Not surprise exactly. More like recalibration. You carry evidence around in your pocket, he said. I didn't want the rain to get to it through the open door, she said. I'm a nurse. I know how to handle things without compromising them. He studied her face with the particular attention of a man who was deciding something. Sheriff Cole Greer, he said, and put out his hand. She shook it. His grip was firm and warm and brief, and when he let go, she was unreasonably aware of the absence of it. He processed the scene methodically. She watched him from the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, while he moved through the room with a deputy at his back, documenting, photographing, crouching to examine the boot print without disturbing it. He stood in front of the writing on the wall for a long time, hands clasped behind his back, saying nothing. Too long, she thought. He stood there too long. A man seeing a threat for the first time puzzled over it. A man seeing something he recognized went quiet. Cole Greer went very quiet. Is there anyone who knew you were coming back to town? He asked, not turning around. No one beyond the estate lawyer, she said. I scheduled a meeting for tomorrow morning. Harlan Briggs. Do you know him? Cole turned then, and his face was the mask again, composed, professional, giving away nothing. Everyone knows everyone in Hollow Creek, he said. That's the nature of a small town. Right, she said. And the nature of a small town is also that someone knew I was arriving tonight before I'd told anyone. He looked at her steadily. What are you suggesting, Miss Calloway? I'm not suggesting anything, she said. I'm just noting that either the timing is extraordinary coincidence, or someone here has been watching this property. Waiting. The silence that followed had a different quality than the ones before it. This one had edges. We'll post a car outside tonight, he said. I'd recommend you sleep somewhere else. Is there family in town? There's no one left, she said. I'll sleep in my car if I have to. I'm not leaving this property. His jaw shifted. A small thing. Almost nothing. The Larkspur Inn on Addison takes walk-ins, he said. Tell them I sent you. He held her gaze just a beat too long again, and she felt it, the same way she felt a change in air pressure before a storm. In her chest, behind her sternum, low and quiet and insistent. She slept at the Larkspur Inn. She did not sleep well. In the morning, Hollow Creek looked exactly the way she remembered it, and entirely wrong at the same time. The coffee shop on Main had its chalkboard sign out front. The hardware store was open. The tabby cat that belonged to no one in particular was asleep in the window of the insurance office. Everything was surface, and under the surface, the town had the particular stillness of something that had learned to hold its breath. Mara ordered black coffee and sat in the window of the coffee shop with her laptop open, pulling up everything she could find about Hollow Creek in the last 2 years. She had a habit of researching. It was the same impulse that made her good at her job, the instinct to understand the chart before she touched the patient. What she found was not nothing, but it was close. A news item from 18 months ago. A woman named Carla Demps, found at the bottom of the old quarry off Route 9, ruled an accidental drowning. Before that, 14 months before Carla, a woman named Tess Whitmore, found in the creek behind the elementary school, ruled accidental drowning. And before Tess, in the winter 2 years prior, a woman named Patience Arlo, found in a flooded drainage ditch on the south side of town, ruled accidental drowning. 3 women, 3 drownings, 3 accidents. Mara set down her coffee cup and looked out the window at the quiet street, and felt the cold thing move through her slowly, deliberately, the way cold always moved in places where something was being hidden. She pulled up Cole Greer, sheriff of Hollow Creek County, elected 3 years ago after the retirement of the previous sheriff, a man named Doyle who had held the position for 2 decades. Cole Greer had previously worked as a detective in a city 2 hours north, had come back to Hollow Creek, had come back, she noted, which meant he was from here, and had run unopposed. His record, publicly at least, was clean. No complaints. No controversies. Community praised. Beloved was the word one local editorial used, and she had found in her experience that beloved was a word small towns used for the people they had decided not to look at too closely. She typed his name into the search field again with different keywords. Cole Greer. Hollow Creek. Investigation. Corruption. Complaint. Lawsuit. Nothing. Which meant either he was genuinely clean or someone had been very careful. She was still thinking about it when the coffee shop door opened and Cole Greer walked in. He was in uniform now, hat under his arm, and he spotted her immediately, which meant he had either seen her car outside or had been told she was here. In a town this size, the second option was entirely possible. He crossed to her table without hesitation and stood there with his hat in his hands. "Miss Calloway," he said. "You can call me Mara," she said. "I think after someone fires a gun in my kitchen, we're past formality." The corner of his mouth moved. Almost a smile. Not quite. "May I?" He gestured at the chair across from her. "Go ahead." He sat, and up close in the daylight he was worse than she remembered from the night before. Or better, the distinction felt increasingly irrelevant. He had a quality of focused stillness, like a man who had trained himself to take up only the space he intended to, and the effort of that restraint was somehow visible in the set of his shoulders, in the careful way he folded his hands on the table. Lab confirmed the substance on the wall was paint, he said. Red acrylic. No prints on the back door or in the kitchen. Whoever it was wore gloves and knew the layout of the house. Knew the layout, she repeated. It was targeted, he said. Not random. I know, she said. I figured that out in the kitchen. He looked at her for a moment. You're not afraid, he said, and it wasn't quite a question. I'm afraid, she said. I'm just not letting it run me. She paused. Can I ask you something? You can ask, he said. Carla Demps. Tess Whitmore. Patience Arlo. She watched his face the way she watched a patient's vitals, looking for the fluctuation that told the real story. And there it was. So brief, she would have missed it if she hadn't been looking for it. A tightening around his eyes, a microsecond of absolute stillness, as if his body had made a decision before his mind caught up. 3 women, she said. 3 drownings. 3 accidents. In 2 years. The coffee shop hummed around them. The sound of the espresso machine. Someone laughing near the back. Ordinary life doing what it always did, going on entirely unbothered. Those were investigated and closed, he said. His voice was even. Careful. Each word placed like a foot on uncertain ground. By your department, she said. By my department, he said. And you're satisfied with those outcomes. He held her gaze and said nothing, and the nothing was the loudest answer she had ever heard. Cole, she said, and she used his first name deliberately, the same way she had the night before, because she had noticed how it changed something in his face when she did. Someone broke into my dead mother's house on the night I arrived and fired a gun and told me to leave. That is not a coincidence. That is a message. And the only way it makes sense as a message is if someone believes that I know something or that I'm going to find something. And the only reason they would believe that is if there is something here worth finding. He was quiet for a long time. Outside, a truck moved slowly down Main Street. A woman pushed a stroller past the window. The tabby cat across the street had changed positions. Your mother, Cole said finally, his voice dropping just slightly. Did she ever contact you about anything concerning in the months before she passed? Anything that worried her? Anything she said she needed to tell you? Mara felt something shift in her chest. A slow, cold displacement. She called me 3 weeks before she died, she said carefully. She said she had found something. She said she was going to show me when I came to visit. But she had a stroke before I could get there, and she never told me what it was. Cole Greer looked at her across the table, and in his eyes, beneath the controlled exterior, beneath the careful professional distance, she saw it again. The same thing she had seen in his face at the fence line the night before. Not deception. Fear. Real, bone-deep, quietly managed fear. Mara, he said, and his voice was low and entirely stripped of its official armor. I need you to listen to me very carefully. She leaned in slightly. Your mother was not the only one in this town who found something, he said. And the women who found it before her. He stopped, looked down at his hands. Looked back up. They drowned, Mara said softly. He held her gaze and said nothing. And the coffee shop went on humming around them, bright and ordinary and completely oblivious, while the ground shifted silently beneath everything. She did not let him see how much that landed. That was the thing about Mara Calloway. She had spent 9 years in trauma bays watching people receive the worst news of their lives. And she had learned that the moment you let the weight of a thing show on your face was the moment you lost the ability to carry it. So she held his gaze steadily and breathed, and let the information move through her the way cold water moved through a wound. Cleaning it. Clarifying it. You're telling me my mother was killed, she said. I'm telling you to be careful, he said. That is not the same thing as a denial. He looked down at his coffee cup, then back up. And the war happening behind his eyes was quiet and private and very, very old. The kind of war a man had been fighting alone for long enough that he had stopped expecting anyone else to see it. There are things in this town, he said slowly, that are older than my position here. Things that were in place long before I put on this badge. Things that have, he stopped, exhaled, that have gravity. Do you understand what I mean by that? I understand that you're choosing your words like a man who knows he's being listened to, she said. His eyes sharpened. He looked around the coffee shop, quickly, once, just a sweep, and something in the gesture made her stomach drop. Because it was not the look of a man being paranoid. It was the look of a man who had learned to check rooms the way other people check the weather. Automatically, constantly, because the cost of not checking had already been paid by someone else. Meet me tonight, he said. Not here, not anywhere in town. There's an old mill off Garrison Road, about 4 miles east of the property line. 8 o'clock. Why should I trust you? She said. It was a fair question. He took it as one. You shouldn't, he said simply. Not yet. But you don't have enough information to make a good decision about any of this. And I'm the only person in this town who's going to give it to you. He paused. And because your mother trusted me. Eventually. The word eventually carried its own story, and she filed it away. 8 o'clock, she said. He stood, tucked his hat under his arm, and dropped a $5 bill on the table even though he hadn't ordered anything. Then he walked out and she watched him through the window get into his cruiser and drive away. And she sat very still and thought about all the things he had said and all the things he hadn't. Her mother had found something. 3 women had drowned. And the sheriff of Hollow Creek was afraid. She drove to the estate lawyer's office at 10, as scheduled. Harlan Briggs occupied a Victorian row house on the corner of Church and 2nd that had been converted into offices sometime in the last decade. All dark wood paneling and the smell of old paper, and a receptionist who looked at Mara with the particular expression of someone who had been briefed and was pretending otherwise. Harlan Briggs was 60, silver-haired, wearing a suit that cost more than made sense for a small-town practice. He had a firm handshake and warm eyes and the smooth, practiced ease of a man who had spent 40 years making people feel comfortable while he handled their most vulnerable moments. She recognized the type immediately. She had worked with doctors like him. Men who had learned that warmth was the most effective form of control. Miss Calloway, he said, I'm so sorry for your loss. Your mother was a remarkable woman. She was, Mara said. Tell me about the property dispute. The warmth flickered. Just for a second. He recovered beautifully. You found the letters, he said. 3 of them, she said. On her dining table. Why didn't she tell me? He folded his hands on the desk and tilted his head with the expression of a man choosing how much of a truth to dispense. Your mother was an extremely private woman about matters she felt were hers to handle. She didn't want to worry you. Who was trying to acquire her property? A holding company, he said. Crestfield Development. They've been buying up land in the county for the last 3 years. Agricultural parcels, mostly. A few residential properties. Your mother's land backs up to the largest section they've already acquired. She refused to sell, Mara said. 3 times, he said, with something that might have been admiration. And then she died. The room went very quiet. Your mother had a stroke, Miss Calloway, he said carefully. The medical examiner. I know what the report says, she said. I've read it. She was 61 years old with no history of cardiovascular disease, normal blood pressure, no risk factors. She had a stroke in her kitchen in the middle of the afternoon on a Tuesday, and by the time the ambulance arrived, she was already gone. She looked at him steadily. She called me 3 weeks before that and told me she had found something and needed to show me. Did she tell you what it was? Harlan Briggs looked at her for a long moment. No, he said. She believed him on the no. She did not believe the blankness that followed it. I'd like copies of all the correspondence with Crestfield Development, she said. And any other documents my mother left with you. Of course, he said smoothly. I'll have my receptionist put together a packet. She was almost at the door when he spoke again. Miss Calloway. His voice had changed. The professional warmth was still there, but something underneath it had shifted, like furniture moved in a dark room. The offer from Crestfield is still on the table. It's a generous one, particularly for land in this county. You might find that settling the estate quickly and cleanly is the most practical path forward. She turned slowly. Practical, she said. Given that you have a life elsewhere, he said. And that small towns can be complicated for people who've been away a long time. She smiled at him. It was the smile she used on difficult patients, calm and opaque and giving away absolutely nothing. "Thank you for your time, Harlan," she said. She walked back to her car in the thin morning sunlight and sat in the driver's seat and let the anger move through her in one clean wave. Her mother, 61 years old, no risk factors, 3 letters from a development company, a phone call about something she had found, and then a Tuesday afternoon and an ambulance and a report that said stroke and a town full of people looking at her with the eyes of people who already knew the shape of what they weren't saying. She gripped the wheel. Then she let go. Then she started the car and drove back to her mother's house and spent the rest of the morning going through every drawer, every cabinet, every shelf, every box in every room with the focused attention of someone who was no longer packing up a life, but searching through one. She found nothing, not in the obvious places. She found it in the one place she hadn't thought to look until almost 3 in the afternoon, when she was sitting on the floor of her mother's bedroom going through a shoebox of old photographs, and her hand brushed the baseboard heater and felt the edge of something that wasn't wall. She pulled the heater panel away from the baseboard, and behind it, wrapped in a gallon Ziploc bag and taped flat with duct tape, was a manila envelope. Her hands were steady as she opened it. Inside were photographs, 12 of them, printed on standard copy paper, slightly grainy, the kind of images you got from a trail camera or a security feed. They showed a property she didn't recognize, a large warehouse structure on flat land, surrounded by trees, at night. In each photograph, there were vehicles, black SUVs, a refrigerated truck, men moving things between the vehicles and the building. In 4 of the photographs, the image was clear enough to show faces. She looked at the faces for a long time. She recognized one of them. She wasn't certain. The image was grainy and the angle was poor, but the build, the posture, the particular way the man stood slightly apart from the others with his hands clasped behind his back. She put the photograph down and picked up the folded note that had been tucked beneath the stack. Her mother's handwriting. Careful, slanted, unmistakable. "If you find this, then something has happened to me, and I am so sorry I couldn't tell you sooner. I was trying to protect you. I was always trying to protect you. The land is not about the land. It's about what's underneath it and what they're moving through it." Harlan knows more than he says. Do not trust the official version of anything. And Mara, be careful of the sheriff. He is caught between something, and I don't know yet which way he will fall. She read it 3 times. Be careful of the sheriff. She folded the note, put everything back in the envelope, tucked it inside her jacket, and sat on the floor of her mother's bedroom for a long moment with her hand pressed flat against the old hardwood floor, as if she could feel the house breathing. Then she thought about 8 o'clock and the mill on Garrison Road. She thought about Cole Greer's face in the coffee shop, the fear she had seen there, the thing he had started to say and stopped. She thought about her mother's note. I don't know yet which way he will fall. She went anyway, because the note had said be careful, not stay away. And because the women who had drowned had probably stayed away, and it had not saved them. She arrived at the mill at 7:45. It was a collapsed structure, really. Whatever timber industry had sustained it was long dead, and the building had been folding back into the land for years, the walls soft with rot, the roof half gone, the whole thing surrounded by tall grass that had grown up through the gravel lot. She parked facing out, a habit she had developed somewhere between finding the shell casing and reading her mother's letter, and killed her lights and sat in the dark. Cole's truck pulled in at 8 on the dot. He climbed out, and she got out to meet him, and neither of them said anything for a moment. The night was clear, cold, all stars, and the darkness here was the dense kind that small rural roads produced, uninterrupted by any other light source. She could see his face in the moonlight, and he could see hers, and there was something about being seen in that quality of light that stripped away whatever daytime allowed a person to hide behind. "You came," he said. "You knew I would," she said. The corner of his mouth moved. "I hoped." She pulled the envelope from her jacket and held it out to him. He looked at it, then at her. Then he took it and opened it and went through the photographs one by one with his back to the truck so the moonlight fell over his shoulder. She watched his face and cataloged everything she saw there. Recognition, heaviness, and something that looked like relief, so painful it was almost grief. The relief of a man who had been carrying something alone for so long that seeing someone else hold even a piece of it made him want to put the rest down. "Where did you find these?" he said. "Behind the baseboard heater in my mother's bedroom," she said. "She hid them 3 weeks before she died. The same week she called me and said she had found something." He put the photographs back in the envelope and held it without moving for a moment. "The warehouse in those pictures," she said. "Do you know it?" "Yes." "What are they moving through it?" He looked at her. "Cole," she said. "What are they moving?" He ran a hand over his jaw, and the gesture was the most unguarded thing she had seen from him. A man reaching the limit of what he could manage to contain. "People," he said quietly. "They're moving people." The word landed in the dark between them like a stone. "Human trafficking," she said. "Hollow Creek sits on 3 county lines," he said, his voice low and controlled. The way people spoke about things that had become too large for normal volume. 2 major highways within 12 miles. The land your mother owned, the back section specifically, borders the only route between the warehouse property and the northern access road that bypasses the county checkpoint. Without that land, the operation has no clean corridor. "So they needed her to sell," Mara said. "And when she wouldn't, she found the photographs," Mara said. "She found out what was actually happening on the land they wanted. And then she died." "Yes," he said. "And the 3 women," she said. "Carla, Tess, Patience. All 3 had connections to the warehouse property. Carla's brother worked security for Crestfield. Tess had started asking questions about the trucks she was seeing on Route 9 at night. Patience," he stopped and his jaw tightened, and she could see the shape of what it cost him. "Patience Arlo was my informant. The night held them both." "You knew," Mara said. "You already knew about all of this. That's why you're afraid." "I've known for 14 months, he said. "And I have spent 14 months trying to build something I can take to the federal level without it getting buried first. Because Crestfield is not just a development company. The people behind it have reach into this county that goes up through the prosecutor's office and through 2 state officials, and I don't know how far further up it goes, and every time I've gotten close to having enough." "Someone drowns," she said. He looked at her with raw, exhausted honesty and said nothing. "Why didn't you leave?" she said. "Why didn't you go federal with what you had, even incomplete?" "Because incomplete gets people killed," he said. "Because I watched Patience die because someone in my own department told them she was talking to me, and I don't know who. And until I know who, I can't trust anyone well enough to move." "So you've been waiting," she said. "Alone?" "Yes," he said. She looked at him in the dark for a long time. The man her mother had written about. Caught between something. Not yet fallen. She thought about the way he had come to the fence line at sunset to tell her a dead woman's name. She thought about the way he had said, "Your mother trusted me." Eventually, carrying the eventually like a weight he had earned. "My mother's photographs," she said. "Are they enough? Combined with what I already have, they might be. But there's one piece missing." He looked down at the envelope and then back at her. "There's a ledger. Physical records of payments, names, dates, routes. Whoever is running this operation is old-fashioned enough or careful enough not to trust digital. If the ledger exists and we can get to it, it's over. Where is it?" He looked at her steadily. "That's what I've been trying to find out for 14 months, he said. She held his gaze and thought about her mother on her knees behind a baseboard heater, hiding photographs, writing a letter to a daughter she loved more than she had ever said, trying to protect something she couldn't name and dying before she got the chance. "Then let's find it," she said. He looked at her, and something in his face shifted. Not the fear was still there, but something alongside it now. Something that complicated the fear considerably, something she recognized and was not going to name yet because they were standing in a dark field and there was a ledger missing and 3 dead women, and the night was not the time for it. "Mara," he said, her name in his mouth carrying more than it should have for a man she had known for less than 24 hours. "Don't," she said quietly. "I wasn't going to say anything," he said. "You were thinking it," she said. He almost smiled. "You always read people this fast?" "Only the ones who are hard to read," she said. "It requires more attention." The almost smile deepened, and in the dark it was devastating, and she turned back to her car before she could let it do anything further. "Tomorrow," she said, "we start with Crestfield's filing records. There's a name on every company, and the name is where the ledger is." "Tomorrow," he agreed. She drove back to the Larkspur Inn with her mother's envelope in her jacket and Cole Greer's voice still low in her ear, saying they're moving people and the full impossible weight of what Hollow Creek had been hiding pressing down on the roof of her car like weather. She lay in the dark of the inn room and stared at the ceiling and breathed. Her phone buzzed. A text from a number she didn't recognize. "You should have left when he told you to. Now it's too late to leave clean." She stared at the message for a long time. Then she typed back, "Good." She put the phone face down on the nightstand, pulled the envelope out from under her pillow, and lay there in the dark with her hand flat against it, feeling the photographs through the paper. 3 dead women. Her mother, a warehouse full of shadows and a ledger no one could find, and a sheriff caught between something, trying to decide which way to fall. She closed her eyes. She was not leaving Hollow Creek. Not until it was finished. She was being followed by 7 the next morning. She noticed it the way she noticed most things. Not dramatically, not with a spike of panic, but with the quiet, clinical precision of someone whose body had learned to register threat the way other people registered weather. A silver sedan. 2 cars back. It had been behind her since she pulled out of the Larkspur parking lot, and it was still behind her when she took the long way around Main Street that no local would take unless they were lost or following someone. She was not lost. She pulled into the gas station on the corner of 5th and Maple, got out slowly, filled her tank without looking at the sedan directly, paid inside, bought a coffee she didn't need, and when she came back out the sedan was gone. Which was almost worse. Gone meant they knew she had made them. Gone meant they were not amateurs. Gone meant whoever was running this had people in this town who were trained and patient and had been doing this long enough to know when to pull back and wait. She drove to the courthouse. Crestfield Development's public filing records were thin but not empty. She sat at a microfiche reader in the county records office for 2 hours, methodically pulling every document attached to the company's land acquisitions over the last 3 years, and what she found confirmed everything Cole had said and added a layer underneath it that made her jaw tighten. Every parcel Crestfield had acquired had been purchased through a chain of 3 shell companies. She traced each one back through the incorporation filings with the patience of someone who had once spent 6 hours reading a patient's complete medical history because a single overlooked notation had saved that patient's life. Details mattered. Chains of custody mattered. Paper always told the truth if you followed it far enough back. The 3rd shell company, buried beneath 2 layers of holding structures, was registered to a man named Raymond Holt. She typed the name into her phone. Raymond Holt, 63, retired state senator, current board member of 4 financial institutions in the state. And she clicked through 2 more pages, founding partner of a private security firm that operated across 3 counties. She looked at that last line for a long time. Private security firm. She thought about the men in her mother's photographs, moving things in the dark, the deliberate way they carried themselves. The way Patience Arlo had been killed without leaving a single piece of evidence that pointed anywhere. Professional, trained, patient. She photographed every document on her phone, tucked her notes into her jacket, and walked out into the thin autumn sunlight. She called Cole. He picked up on the first ring. "Raymond Holt," she said. A pause. 3 full seconds. "Where are you?" he said. "Courthouse steps." "Stay there. Don't move. I'm 6 minutes away." He was there in 5. He pulled up in his personal truck, not the cruiser, which she noted and appreciated. He leaned across and pushed the passenger door open, and she got in without discussion, and he drove without saying anything for the first 2 minutes, taking the road out of town in the opposite direction from the mill, heading east toward the river. "You know that name," she said. "Raymond Holt was the reason I left the city," he said. His voice was measured, but underneath it something was running fast and dark, the way water ran fast under ice. "I was a detective. I was building a case against a trafficking network that operated across 4 counties. I had 18 months of work. Witnesses, financial records, chain of evidence." He paused. "My supervisor buried it. Retired 6 months later on a pension that didn't add up. And Raymond Holt's name was at the bottom of every financial thread I had pulled. You came home to Hollow Creek because of him," she said. "He grew up here," Cole said. "This is where the original operation started. 30 years ago, before he was a senator, before the security firm, before any of it. It started here in Hollow Creek, and it never left. He just built a cleaner exterior around it. And you've been here 3 years building a case. A case that keeps losing its witnesses," he said, and the grief in that sentence was old and dense and utterly contained. She thought about the weight of that. For years. Watching people die, holding the shape of something monstrous and being unable to release it because incomplete gets people killed. Harlan Briggs, she said. Holt's man inside the town, Cole said. Legal cover, land management, keeps things moving smoothly. Harlan doesn't get his hands dirty, but he greases everything that does. The deputy, she said. The one who told them about patience. He was quiet for a moment. I have a suspicion, he said. I can't prove it yet. Which one? Mara. Cole. She turned in her seat to face him. Which one? He glanced at her, and his eyes were the dark, complicated color of a man who had been managing alone for too long and was only now, only in the last 2 days, feeling the specific ache of not being alone anymore. Briggs called someone the morning after you walked into his office, he said. The call went to a prepaid. I've been tracing it. I think it goes to my deputy. Caulfield. The nervous one, she said. He took my statement the first night. He's been in Holt's pocket since before I got here, Cole said. I think. I'm not certain enough. But certain enough to tell me, she said. He glanced at her again, and this time he didn't look away as fast. You're the only person in this town I'm certain about, he said quietly. The truck moved along the river road, and the water ran silver below them through the trees, and the morning light was doing something unreasonable to the inside of the cab, and she looked out the window before she did something she hadn't given herself permission for yet. The ledger, she said. Yes, he said, accepting the redirect with the grace of a man who understood timing. Holt grew up here. 30 years of operation. The original infrastructure is here somewhere. Where does he keep records he doesn't trust to digital? I've been through every property he owns or has owned in this county, Cole said. Nothing. Not his property, Mara said slowly. Think about it. If you had something that valuable, something that incriminating, you wouldn't keep it somewhere attached to your own name. You'd keep it somewhere no one would think to look. She stopped. She thought about a house. An old house on Croft Road. A dead woman who had refused to sell. Land that bordered the only clean corridor to the North Access Road. Cole, she said. My mother's land. He looked at her sharply. She found the photographs, Mara said, the pieces assembling themselves with horrible clarity, the way a diagnosis sometimes came together in a rush, every symptom suddenly pointing at the same thing. She wasn't just watching them. She was watching them because they were on her property. They were using the back section of her land for access, and she caught them. We searched the property, Cole said. Did you search the old root cellar? She said. He looked at her. My father built it in the 80s, she said. It's behind the tree line, past the creek, set into the hillside. My mother used it for canning for 20 years. It floods every spring, and she stopped using it when I was 12. There is no reason anyone would know it existed unless they grew up in this house. The truck was already turning around. They drove fast and in silence, the kind of silence that had too much inside it to leave room for words. And when they turned onto Croft Road, Mara saw the silver sedan parked on the verge 100 meters past the property entrance, and her stomach dropped. They're already here, she said. Cole had already seen it. He was on his radio before she finished the sentence, calling it in on a frequency she didn't recognize, not the department's standard channel, and she realized he had a secondary line. Something clean, something that bypassed Caulfield and whoever else was compromised. Federal contact, he said, catching her look. I've been feeding them what I have for 6 months. If we find the ledger today, they move today. And if we don't get to it first, then whoever is in that sedan gets there first, and it disappears, and we're back to nothing. He parked at the property entrance, and they moved fast, through the front gate, across the yard, around the side of the house where the tree line thickened and the land began to slope down toward the creek. Mara led. She knew this land in her bones, had run it 1,000 times as a child, and her body remembered the way even after 8 years. The soft spot in the ground near the big oak, the place where the creek narrowed, the hillside that looked like undifferentiated slope until you knew where to push through the brush. She heard them behind her before she saw them. Movement in the trees to the left, parallel to their line, and she grabbed Cole's arm, and he was already turning, already had his hand on his weapon. How many? She breathed. 2, he said, barely a sound. They ran, not in panic, in strategy. She pulled him right, down the steeper bank, through the creek crossing that soaked them both to the knee, up the other side where the hillside curved and the root cellar sat recessed into the earth, its old wooden door so overgrown with ivy that it was almost entirely invisible. She dropped to her knees and pulled the ivy back with both hands, found the iron handle, rusted but intact, and wrenched it open. The smell hit her first, earth and cold, and something older beneath it. She pulled out her phone and switched on the torch, and they both went in fast and low, and Cole pulled the door shut behind them. Dark, cold, the sound of their own breathing. She swept the light around the space. Stone walls, old wooden shelving, jars still on it, her mother's handwriting on the labels in faded marker. A dirt floor, a rusted drainage grate in the corner, and in the far corner, beneath a canvas tarp that had been placed with a deliberateness entirely inconsistent with the rest of the abandoned space. She crossed to it in 3 steps and pulled the tarp back. A metal lockbox, fireproof, the kind used for document storage. No combination, a key lock. She looked at Cole. He looked at it. "Can you open it?" she said. He pulled a multi-tool from his jacket, crouched in front of the box, and worked the lock with a focus and efficiency that told her this was not the first lock he had opened under pressure. It took 4 minutes. It felt like 40. The lid came open. Inside, wrapped in plastic sheeting, was a ledger. Thick, cloth-bound. 30 years of entries in a small, meticulous hand. Names, dates, dollar amounts, routes, and tucked inside the front cover, a USB drive and 3 folded documents that even at a glance carried the unmistakable architecture of official state correspondence. Cole sat back on his heels and looked at it, and his exhale was the longest and most complete thing she had ever heard from him. 30 years, he said softly. "It's enough?" she said. "It's everything," he said. A sound above them. Footsteps on the hillside, moving past, not slowing. They held still and breathed shallow, and the footsteps moved on and eventually faded. Cole had his phone out, sending images, sending location, activating something that set a chain in motion she could hear in the quality of his movements. Purposeful, final, the movements of a man releasing something he had been holding onto with both hands for 3 years. They stayed in the root cellar for 22 minutes while Cole coordinated. She sat on the cold floor with her back against the stone wall, and he sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched, and neither of them moved away from it. The dark was not frightening. It was the first completely quiet moment she had had since she drove into Hollow Creek, and she let herself feel the full weight of the last 48 hours in it. Her mother, the photographs, the note. "I was always trying to protect you." She pressed her fingers against her eyes. She knew, Cole said quietly. She didn't have to ask what he meant. She found the photographs, and then she found this, Mara said. She knew about the cellar because she built it. She found the box, and she didn't move it because moving it would have told them she knew. She was trying to get evidence to me, Cole said. She came to me 2 weeks before she died. She didn't tell me what she had found, but she was feeling me out, trying to decide if she could trust me. "Be careful of the sheriff," Mara said softly. She wrote that. "I don't know yet which way he will fall." He was quiet beside her for a long moment. "I should have moved faster," he said. "I should have found a way to tell her that she wasn't alone in this." She knew, Mara said. At the end, she knew. The note said she trusted you eventually. She was trying to protect you too. That was who she was. His hand found hers in the dark. Not grasping, not urgent, just there. Warm and steady and completely deliberate. The touch of a man who had thought about it and decided, who was not going to pretend it was anything other than what it was. She turned her hand over and held his. They stayed like that in the cold, in the dark, and the earth smell while above them the world they had been navigating for 2 days began, quietly and irrevocably, to change. The federal units arrived in Hollow Creek at 2:17 that afternoon. She knew the exact time because she was standing at the edge of the property when the convoy of black vehicles moved down the county road, and she checked her phone, and the time was the kind of detail that planted itself permanently in your memory, that you could recall with perfect clarity 20 years later the way you recalled the exact moment certain things ended. Harlan Briggs was arrested at his office on Church and 2nd, mid-sentence on a phone call he did not finish. Deputy Caulfield was taken in the parking lot of the department, and she heard later from Cole that Caulfield had not been surprised, that he had simply put his hands up with the expression of a man who had been waiting for it, and was almost grateful the waiting was over. Raymond Holt was arrested at his home 2 counties north at 4 in the afternoon. She saw it on the news on her laptop in her mother's kitchen, sitting at the table where 3 letters from Crestfield Development had sat unopened, and she watched the footage of a 63-year-old man in a cardigan being walked to a federal vehicle with his hands behind his back, and she felt something complicated that was not quite satisfaction and not quite grief, but lived somewhere between the two, in the territory that belonged to things that were finished but had cost too much. Cole came to the house at 7. She heard his truck on the gravel and opened the door before he knocked, and they stood in the doorway looking at each other in the early evening light. Both of them slightly wrecked, slightly windswept, carrying the particular quality that belonged to people who had moved through something at speed and were only now, in the stillness after, beginning to feel the full shape of it. "It's done," she said. "It's done," he said. "The ledger is in federal hands. The operation is finished. It's going to take months to unwind, but the structure is gone. It's over." She stepped back from the door, and he came inside. She made tea because it was something to do with her hands, and he sat at her mother's kitchen table, and she stood at the counter, and for a few minutes neither of them spoke, which was not uncomfortable, but simply true. 2 people occupying the same space at the end of something and not yet knowing what came after it. "You could have been killed," he said. "Any point in the last 2 days. The shot in the kitchen, the sedan, the cellar, any of it. So could you," she said. "For 3 years." He looked at her with that quality she had cataloged from the first moment and still did not have a complete word for. Not just attraction. That was too simple, too clean. Something more structural. The look of a man who had found something he hadn't known he was missing and was now doing the math on what it would cost him to let it go. "You said 2 weeks, he said. "I said 2 weeks, maybe less," she said. "Is it still maybe less?" She set the mugs on the table and sat down across from him. "The house still needs to be packed," she said. "That's not an answer," he said. "The estate still needs to be settled," she said. "Mara," he said. She looked at him across her mother's table in her mother's kitchen, in the town she had left and come back to and nearly died in, and found the thing her mother had died trying to protect. And she felt the question he was asking move through her the way everything else had moved through her in the last 2 days. Clearly, honestly, without the protective layer she normally kept between herself and things that could matter. "Ask me properly," she said softly. He leaned forward across the table, and his eyes were very dark and very close, and the fear was gone from them now, replaced by something she recognized, because she had been feeling it herself since a rainy night on a county road and a pair of boots on wet asphalt. "Stay," he said. Simply, completely. The way he said everything, without lifting it at the end, stating it rather than asking, which somehow made it more of a question than any question had ever been. She looked at him for a long time. "I have a job," she said. "I have an apartment. I have a whole life 200 miles from here." "I know," he said. "This town tried to kill me twice in 48 hours, she said. "I know," he said. "And you're asking me to stay," she said. "I'm asking you to stay," he said. She reached across the table and her fingers touched the back of his hand, and he turned it over the same way he had in the dark of the root cellar, immediate and deliberate, and she felt the warmth of it move up through her arm and settle somewhere central and important. "I'll stay through the packing," she said. He smiled, and it was the first complete, unguarded, fully present smile she had seen from him. Not the almost smile, not the near smile, the real one. It rearranged his face entirely, and it was, she thought, the most dangerous thing about him. "The packing could take a long time," he said. "It could," she agreed. Outside, Hollow Creek moved through its evening. Lights coming on in windows. The coffee shop turning its sign. The tabby cat changing position in the insurance office window for the last time before closing. The creek running at the edge of the property, indifferent and constant, carrying everything and nothing. Inside, at a kitchen table, 2 people sat in the warm light with their hands folded together and the long, complicated work of beginning something ahead of them, and neither of them looked away. But the town was not finished with them yet. 3 days later, the federal prosecutor called Cole with information extracted from the ledger, a name on the last page, added recently, in different ink, a name that did not belong to Raymond Holt's operation but was connected to it, a loose thread that ran in a direction no one had expected. The name was her father's. Her father, who had left when she was 9, who she had not spoken to in 23 years, who her mother had never explained and Mara had stopped asking about. She stood in the kitchen with Cole's hand on her shoulder and the phone against her ear and felt the ground beneath her life shift in a way she recognized now. The way she had learned to recognize it in this town. Not an ending, a beginning. And if you want to know what her father's name in that ledger means, if you want to know how deep this goes, and who else in Hollow Creek has been living a double life, and what Cole finds when he starts pulling that last thread, then make sure you are subscribed, because that story is coming and it starts exactly where this one ends. Hit the like button if you felt every single second of this. Drop a comment below and tell me the moment you knew Cole Greer was not who he seemed, or the moment you decided to trust him anyway. Your comments are how this channel grows, and your support is what brings the next story to life. Hollow Creek is not finished, and neither are we.